What if the future of good governance wasn't something that we write in reports, but build like a prototype? I'm Sevim. I used to build things with steel and concrete. Now I build things with words and laws. And let me tell you, the latter is much harder to get right. Because behind every ambitious policy lies the same problem, a gap between idea and execution. I came to Brussels 5 years ago when I graduated from engineering and found myself in Brussels. Not because I was passionate about politics, not at all, in fact. What brought me here was the European Green Deal, and more specifically, the climate technologies behind it. And soon I realized politics was actually full of brilliant people. I remember a meeting on decarbonizing construction. Around the table, economists, lawyers, policymakers, sharp minds. But as I looked around, I realized that none of us had ever poured a concrete foundation. And yet, we were about to write the rules on how others should. Look, we're not missing expertise. We're missing experience. But I had just discovered this miracle called the European Union, an institution that somehow manages to make decisions on energy, defense, markets, among nations that speak different languages, have different interests, resources, and cultures. I thought that was extraordinary. I mean, if I plan a skiing trip with my friends, for example, which I'm doing at the moment, in fact, and bear in mind, with my friends, we all have the same mindset already, it still takes ages to decide where to go, which time frame, what budget, or which activities we want to do. And you might recognize it in any planning activity that you're embarking on yourself. And yet, the EU manages to find consensus among 27 nations. I thought, people should know about this. So I tried something small. I opened a social media account to share my experiences online. As a normal human being, not a spokesperson. I didn't have any big plans, nor did I ever have experience on communications before. I didn't know whether I will like it or whether I will be consistent in the first place. It was an experiment based on curiosity. So I tested, failed, learned, and iterated. In fact, I used to send all of my posts to my family members before to see whether they understand it, implement their feedback, and then share it online. And soon I realized that the community was growing to thousands and thousands of followers. And it became a showcase on how to communicate effectively and understandably to citizens. Friends, again, I'm an engineer. This was the first attempt of mine on communication. And the reason it worked out was, one, I called it an experiment, which took away the pressure from me, to be honest, but also it kept the door open for failure. And second, I tried out to find out. I didn't wait for the perfect timing or the perfect social media strategy. I just started and learned on the way. And what started as a small experiment made me realize something bigger. That governments should be allowed to experiment the same way. Sometimes all it takes is a small experiment for people to realize that change is possible. And there are good examples out there, like Denmark, for example, who has the grip on this prototyping mindset in governments. Let's take the wind energy revolution of Denmark as an example. So we're going back to the 70s, where the first wind cooperatives were established. And let me tell you, it was messy. The budgets were overrunning, inconsistent turbine performances, and community disputes. But Denmark didn't decide to draw back. It decided to learn and to iterate on new ownership models or standards that developed. And today, Denmark is one of the global wind powerhouses. But unfortunately, it's not the norm, because there's this clash of mindsets. And I noticed this in particular in my first few years at the European Commission. While I was thinking in flowcharts and in tables and how things would work out practically, what I was faced with was text, text, and more text. A lot of theory. And in fact, in the beginning, we wouldn't understand each other with my colleagues. I mean, the number one feedback I would get from my boss is, Sevim, you need to learn the Commission language. And let me tell you something about this mindset clash. In engineering, failure is a feature. In fact, we expect failure because we know we need to try out to find out, especially when we're embarking on new territories. However, in governance, it's a scandal. And exactly that needs to change. Because bear in mind, both worlds are high-stakes environments. When a building or a bridge fails, lives are on the line. If a policy fails, it hits the budget and public trust. So maybe there is something for governments to learn from this builder's mindset. And here's the uncomfortable truth. This change doesn't necessarily start with our governments. It starts with us, the citizens. At the end of the day, our institutions are reflecting our expectations. And if we expect every policy to be perfect from day one, we create a culture that fears trying. On the one hand, we say we want innovation. On the other hand, we punish every mistake. Meanwhile, AI, climate, energy, migration, these are all topics that are pushing us with a new set of questions that we've never faced before. And if we wait until we're certain, we'll always be too late. If we want faster learning, we, the citizens, need to stop diluting responsibility and start owning it. Because governance is not a spectator sport. So instead of turning every setback into blame, maybe we can see the attempts as a sign of trying. Culture changes when perception changes. Namely, in the moment when we stop seeing governments as them and start seeing it as us. And that's exactly how we can all become builders, if you want a new generation of public builders. And here's a little tip for you on how you yourself can keep track of the level of ownership in our society. Have a look at public toilets. Everyone expects them to be clean. They rarely are. And I know it wasn't anyone's fault here, but we all know it kinda is. Everyone behaves as if it's not their responsibility to keep things running. But a moment of responsibility multiplied by many is what keeps our systems running. And that's exactly the same in governance as well. If we treat governments like public toilets, so we expect perfection, well, none of us want to clean up and get involved itself, decay is inevitable. But when citizens, so us, act like co-owners instead of customers, our entire systems can become more resilient, safer, cleaner. So here's my plea to you. Tomorrow, try something out yourself. In your team, in your institution, in your company, instead of waiting for the perfect plan, prototype it. By next month, shadow someone who builds something. Anyone in your sector who turns an idea into something that you can touch. So that's a criteria. And I can promise you, 1 week in their shoes will teach you way more than a year of strategy papers. And by next year, be able to say that you have become the bridge Be the person who invited the builders into the policymaking room. Or better yet, be the builder who walks in yourself. You need to realize this. The future of politics is being shaped by builders. China is an engineering powerhouse. And one of the oldest and most powerful democracies is led by a real estate tycoon. And Europe? Well, in Europe, we could become the champions of democracy, the builders of the championing of democracy. Well, and we could call ourselves the European builders. Are you down? Yes! Thank you very much.